Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jennifer and...
Jennifer.
And we just wanted to hop on a little bit today, just for a short while, to talk about what happened yesterday with the discovery of two children's bodies. One now we know has been confirmed by Kay Woodcock as the remains of J.J. Vallow. Not the way we wanted this case to end, but at least there's some, at least we have some answers now. A lot more answers to come, I'm sure. We just want to say that we're definitely thinking of all the family right now. Got to be a very, very hard day. 8 months of not knowing, and then
Exactly.
So I'm sure that they are digesting everything, and our thoughts go out to them. We've gotten to know them a little bit through the Facebook groups that have discussed the case really since it went into the media. And so we just want to say that we're thinking of Kay, Larry, Colby, Annie, and everybody else that love these kids.
Yeah, it's heart-wrenching hearing the what we just watched and the hearing or whatever, and the wording and all that was used. It's tough to
Yeah, it's tough to hear that. The prosecutor made a comment about the way in which one set of remains were discovered. It was, in other words, the word he used meant in a particularly bad way. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to speculate on that because we don't know anything for sure, but it seems like at least one set of remains were disposed of in a very disturbing manner. We know they had kind of been centered around that fire pit. And if you read the charges of concealment and destruction of evidence, I think maybe putting two and two together, we might assume that maybe he has attempted to burn some evidence in that fire pit at his home. And in fact, somebody had posted who lives local, just recently had posted that maybe a week and a half ago, they saw Chad having a bonfire with about 8 to 10 other people. So you have to wonder, who were those people? And, were they just totally oblivious? Or, I think one of the big questions now is are any of his kids involved? Do any of his kids have any knowledge of what happened? I mean, what are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're still got a little bit, of theories of what we think. I've been reading a little bit, this morning and last night on, and we talked earlier about, how law enforcement can tell when there's been disturbed ground. And I mean, we don't know, did they have drones looking at the property? Anything like that. We just don't know yet, but it's a possibility.
Yeah. So, talking about the family, I was thinking last night, I was laying in the bed just, kind of thinking about everything that had happened yesterday, because I think, the one thing that we both had talked about is when facts start coming out, in the years that I've covered trials, I would say expect the unexpected. Sometimes, we theorize so much especially when law enforcement's very tight-lipped, because that's all we can do. And, people sleuth on the internet and we've helped with that. We found some, so kind of buried social media accounts of Alex Cox and shared those with Tylee's Aunt Annie. And, but for me, the family, the big thing that I thought about last night was Colby. I feel sorry for every family member that is living this nightmare right now. But if you look at Colby, he has lost both of his siblings and his mother. And people might say, oh, his mom's crazy. But, Colby was raised by Lori. It seemingly, from what we've heard from Annie and Kay at one point in interviews, they had a lot of love for Lori at one point, and they said that she was the perfect mom. And she was an excellent mom. So at some point, something changed. And I think her issues go way back, and she hid them very well from people. But, I'm sure for Colby, it's very gut-wrenching because not only is he dealing with the loss of his only two siblings, the mom that raised him and that he undoubtedly loved and loves, I'm sure he still loves his mother, he's lost his whole family.
Yeah, that has to be tough. And, he's been silent. He hasn't, and, when the videos he does, say stuff, people, dissect it and say, all kind of things. And I don't blame him. This is a private time, and we've, these families, a lot of them have come public and, helped and, made comments and shared things that they knew. And, you have to give them time.
Oh, yeah.
To, process everything and all. But, yeah, definitely he's had his world turned upside down.
Yeah.
I mean, who thinks your mom's going to, end up killing your brother or your sister?
Right. And I know that everybody was concerned, that before, I would say even probably before Charles died. But, if you have somebody who's relatively normal for most of their life, as off the wall as their beliefs may be, you might be quick to dismiss that as a phase, or she's just really focused on something right now. I don't think that, obviously nobody thought she could hurt those kids because they wouldn't be in her care. We do know Charles had concerns and they were dismissed by the police department. We've seen it firsthand with body cam footage. But, so I think for Colby, this probably, there's probably no doubt Colby thought his mom was a little odd in ways, but you just never look at somebody in your family who's acting weird or has weird beliefs, and hers were really weird. But, I don't think anybody at the end of the day, knowing what kind of mom they said she was before the kids went missing, would have ever thought she would have killed them.
Exactly.
Or had anything to do with it.
Yeah. And how do you get to that point?
Yeah.
We talked yesterday about just the mental aspect. When you don't, when you place things in other people, and we've heard from Melanie Gibbs saying, that Chad would talk to Lori and then Lori would share things with them and, stuff like that. When you place that, the majority of your, your beliefs and everything in a person, it gets dangerous. And you can look back through history and see where other things have happened. With large cases, Jim Jones and, getting everybody to drink the Kool-Aid and, things like that. I think mentally that's where you get to is, she put everything, and she's not innocent in any means.
No.
We can look back, prior to meeting him, and there was, always issues, but her kids, I don't think it was ever, from Colby's stories, he, loved his mom, had a great childhood, different things.
Right. And I think, at some point, for me, if I know somebody who's had 4 marriages that failed and they're always claiming to be the victim and the one who had things done wrong, in a sense that's very narcissistic. Narcissists believe that anything bad that happens is they're the victim. They're never responsible for actions. Everybody is out to get them. So clearly Lori had some mental issues before Charles died, maybe even before she met Chad. But I think that they fueled each other, and then here we are, unfortunately. So to recap, yesterday at 7 in the morning, Rexburg Police, Fremont Police, and the FBI executed a search warrant on the property of Chad Daybell. And we were talking about how clearly this came from somebody because of how quickly they went to the area, and within an hour we had an announcement there were human remains found. Who do you think may have told where those remains were?
I mean, I've read, could it have been Lori? And we we saw a post about that, but it's not confirmed. About, she kind of flipped out, when she found out, that is that true? We don't know. All this is speculation. And everything we say here is just our opinion and, stuff we've read. But, is it her? I read this morning, is it Zalima? She's been the quiet one in this whole thing. And we know she was with Alex. So, did Alex tell her what went on?
There's no telling. Hello real quick to Mikhail, who's in our chat. If you come to the website of the, or on the app, you can chat with us. But we just want to say a quick hello and let you know we see you're here. We appreciate you listening. So I think it's good. It's a big question. Yesterday at first, I really thought maybe Lori was the one, just because it's so specific. Even down to probably a few feet. I mean, it was exact. Now, like you said, is it a situation where maybe they flew drones over that area for weeks after the ground, the snow was gone and the ground had thawed out, and then you look for patterns in the grass where there's bald spots or the terrain is slightly different. These FBI guys, investigators, they are trained how to spot just, irregularities in the terrain that might indicate a body's buried there. But Chad was also a grave digger. So I'm sure that in some capacity, he knew how to, when the earth settled, to make sure it didn't cave in, things like that. So, I just think that, but going back to what we were talking about, it could be Zulema. It still could be Lori. And like we said yesterday, if they backed her in a corner, to where they have shown her the evidence that they have that is enough to put her away for the rest of her life, could a deal have been struck? Maybe. There were a lot of things being floated around between the groups that we go into to discuss this case. Some of the people that posted, I tend to trust. They always seem to be pretty accurate about their facts. But, on the other hand, just last week or a couple of weeks ago when they were digging on the property for the missing woman in Colorado, there were Facebook pages that had very specific details about what they were looking for and what they had supposedly found, only for investigators to leave with nothing. So you have to be really careful online. But yesterday we had some posts very early on that were claiming that I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
Sorry, I distracted you.
Yes, you did distract me with your little hand motion there.
Talking about they didn't find anything.
Right, but there were things being floated around on social media that were very specific. But yesterday, very early on, it seemed like it leaked out that it was at least JJ. It supposedly had come from a family member. I believe that completely. So, by early evening yesterday, we kind of had confirmation that at least one of the set of remains was JJ. Nothing specific on Tylee, but that brings me back to what the prosecutor said about the body being concealed or buried in other words, what they say is a grotesque or unnatural, or, the definition of the word.
Manner of concealment of one of the bodies which bears on character of the defendant was kind of, and that word is egregious.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, it was a step above just burying a body. So, you could speculate, and I don't want to get too, overstep any boundaries here, but this is a murder case, and this is what we are talking about. Makes me wonder if perhaps a body was dismembered. Mm-hmm. That, to me, that would be the kind of only way I could see that word being used in that context, is that perhaps the body was dismembered, because that's sort of what the word points to. I mean, it's all devastating, and
is that the reason it's taken longer, to identify?
It could be. Now, they took the bodies to Ada, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, which is about, we pulled it up on Google Maps, it was about 4.5, maybe 5 hours away from Rexburg. So clearly kind of a special, whatever they have there, I would assume is a special facility or whatever. I think the feds would have, somebody very qualified doing these autopsies. You're going to have to determine a cause of death. we've got remains, but now the big question is going to be, how were they killed? And that'll come out, at some point. But I can't imagine what the families having to watch this unfold over, the media on a worldwide scale at this point just has to be devastating. So,
and looking back at like today, we saw Eric, from East Idaho News. He just put out a little bit ago that the FAA has issued a no-fly zone over the Daybell home as they continue day 2 of the search. We thought that was interesting because obviously there was some drone activity yesterday with some of the HD shots that were, put out online, and they were, a whole lot clearer than, Nate's flyover or whatever.
Right.
So they issued that today, which that mean, does that mean they have more bodies there, or, you just don't know?
Right. I mean, I think for them to issue the no-fly order today, once we know at this point 2 sets of remains that they admitted to in the hearing were children, which obviously is going to be JJ and Tylee. We know for sure one's JJ. It's just natural to assume the other one's Tylee. But why would you issue a no-fly zone when those remains have been removed? Is it a situation where maybe it wasn't a complete set of remains? I don't know, but there's a reason, and I would be curious to see. I mean, at this point, I don't put anything out of the question. Could they find more bodies? Could Chad be somebody who has done this before for sport or fun? I don't know. I mean, but there's a reason there's a no-fly zone over there today, and I don't think it's just because the investigators don't want to be disturbed.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a post this morning. Somebody said they're going to end up digging up his whole yard.
They may. That's 3 acres. There's a lot of places. That's a lot of land. And I'm sure the FBI has fancy sonar where they could, possibly see things that are underground before they have to dig. But, we don't know. We don't know at the end of the day, did somebody give a tip, or did they, maybe fly some kind of specialized drone over there that led them right to that spot? We just don't know yet. That'll come out. At some point. So back to the hearing today, if you were not able to tune in, what did you think about Chad's demeanor in court?
He smirked some.
He did.
And I guess I wasn't shocked because, Lori did the same thing. And we've talked about it when you have somebody that's narcissistic, they don't think they're wrong, they think they're in control, and, all of that. You don't, you think you're still in control. And we've seen that through Lori when she's come out for her hearings. Mm-hmm. And how you can smile and act that way when you know your children are deceased and you played a part in that. I don't see how you do that. But again, we're looking at it with our minds that we're not perfect, but
we're not crazy.
We're not crazy, and we understand right and wrong and all that stuff.
I don't know. Somebody might dispute that when I say I'm not crazy, but
that's true. That's true.
But I mean, I'm a mother. I have 3 kids. I can't imagine anybody hurting my kids, much less anything to ever make me want to hurt my kids. I just really am interested to see at the end of the day Lori's role in this. I feel like they're going to punt the ball and implicate Alex for the most part. One of the charges did say that he, essentially, if you read it, it implicates that maybe that he was not alone when he did this, that he participated or had help. So I feel like that would be Alex, don't you?
Yeah. And we go back to, if you remember what I think it was FBI said, that we talked about the other day, that they had reason to, implicate him.
Right.
Had evidence, that pointed that he did assist in something. So then I question, did Alex leave a trail or leave evidence or, tell Zulema or,
mm-hmm.
Leave a journal? I mean, I don't know, of what happened.
Yeah, I just think that the digital evidence trail in this case is going to be what fills in a lot of gaps. I was really worried we would never have bodies, which
mm-hmm.
would make prosecuting this case a lot more difficult. Just recently, the FBI said there's no sign of life, there's no sign of death. It's almost like, up until yesterday, they had vanished into thin air. And so now that you have a body, you definitely have a much stronger case, especially once that manner of death is established. There's probably going to be aggravating factors that are going to make the charges even more severe. But it'll be interesting to see in the end when we get a much bigger picture as these facts start to pour out. The biggest picture. And my big question, obviously, is, I don't know that this will ever be known. Was Lori there when the kids were killed? Was she there when they were buried? I'm curious to see her participation in any of this. And as we know in past cases, if you know a crime is going to happen and you don't report it, then you get charged. If she was there when the kids were killed but didn't lay a hand on them, she still could be charged with first-degree murder. So it's going to be interesting to see how much of this I think they try to pin on Alex. But, Chad is up the creek without a paddle, not going back. I don't think the man will ever see freedom again. So for the hearing today, yeah, I agree. Chad did smirk a couple of times. He seemed very tired. Did you notice that he was dozing a few times?
Yeah, I don't think he slept too well.
Yeah, being in the clink for the first time in your life isn't pleasant, but that's going to be his home probably till the day he takes his last breath. So get used to it, buddy. A couple of times he could have dozed off, I thought.
Yeah. Kicking over a little bit to Yellowstone, we talked about this a little bit earlier before we got on, but what was that used, and we don't know, I mean, we may find out in the investigation, was that used as a distraction? I know Annie Cushing had, made statements that when she was with him, they wasn't the outdoorsy type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Lori doesn't strike me as somebody that would go camping in the middle of Yellowstone in a tent.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah, so was that used as a distraction to focus the police to look there, and then they end up being buried in, Chad's backyard. So
I don't know. I'm curious to find out where they think Tylee might have been killed. I still believe with all my heart that those heavy tubs that we saw on the storage unit surveillance, I'm convinced, I don't want to say convinced, I would say it's a good probability that maybe there were remains in those tubs because everything that was put into there, with the exception of the tire from the Jeep that we believe was taken off to take the shot at Brandon Bordeaux, the tubs were the only thing seemingly that were taken out of that storage shed.
Exactly.
So, do we find later, maybe the storage, I wonder what they're looking for today. It could be that they're looking for any kind of murder weapon, any other kind of evidence. My mind keeps going back to the no-fly zone, and we've already removed the bodies of the kids. So what is so secretive about what they're doing now? We'll have to wait and see, I guess. So for the court hearing today, Chad came in. He was in his gray and white stripes. If you weren't able to watch, it was just very formal. They asked Chad a lot of questions about his understanding of the charges. He only replied yes, probably about 7 or 8 times to the questions that the judge asked of him before they really could get started good. So just to recap what happened in court today, they read the charges against Chad. Chad's lawyer had requested they not read the charges, that they waived the right to have the charges read, but the judge did it anyway.
Yeah, because it needed to be on record.
Right. This same judge is the one that lowered Lori's bond from $5 million to $1 million, and then he was taken off the case, or I think maybe he took himself off the case. But Chad had the same lawyer today that Lori did when she was extradited back to Rexburg from Kauai. So both of them have bail set at $1 million. The defense attorney asked originally for $100,000, as did Lori's attorney, interestingly enough, at the last hearing. It seems like they kind of had the same playbook. And their argument is that the charges that they currently face do not warrant a $1 million bail. Chad's lawyer at one point essentially said, you need to make the bail appropriate for the charges. $1 million bail is not appropriate for a 5-year sentence. And then he said, if the prosecution wanted bigger a bigger bail, they should have pursued bigger charges. And we just want to put out there, because this is public knowledge, that Chad Daybell's attorney was arrested in April and booked for intent to commit rape. Now, I know everybody's innocent until proven guilty. We're not implicating he's guilty of these charges or innocent. I think it's interesting to note that just a couple of months ago, his attorney had a mugshot taken and was detained and put in jail.
Yeah.
So, so the attorney just said, hey, if you wanted a higher bail, you should have charged differently. You should have charged higher. That can't happen until the autopsy. They have to determine a cause of death. They have to make sure it was homicide. And then those charges are going to be upgraded. People are really upset that these charges are all he has right now, which is a maximum of 5 years in jail and a $10,000 fine.
Yeah. I think right now it's the same with Lori. I mean, they're holding him on those counts because right now that's all they have until the autopsies, come back and all that. And then they, we know those charges are gonna be upgraded.
Right. And what you have to understand is in these cases, you don't want this to fall apart in court on a technicality. When you have now so much strong evidence, which is obviously physical with the bodies being found as well as the digital, you don't want this case to get tossed out of court because of something you shouldn't have done. Right now, the charges that Lori has, the charges that Chad has, those are just placeholders. That's just to get them in custody. They can prove right now that he is guilty of 2 felonies that have a maximum of 5 years each. They can prove that today in court. They can't prove murder just yet until those autopsies are back. Yeah. That's why they're being held on these smaller charges. However, the judge set both bails at such a high amount that he was letting them know, we understand the charges you are currently charged with are in no way comparable to what you're going to be charged with. And they mentioned aggravating factors, which is the condition of that one body on the property, probably, I would assume, would say that's an aggravating factor. Of course, murdering a kid's an aggravating factor, but they're not going anywhere. I would be very surprised if Chad were to make bail. Now, they do have some rich friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I was nervous up until listening to it because you hear both arguments. And, you're kind of nervous, what's that judge going to do? And, thankfully, when he said $1 million, I was like, yes. But like you said, does he have, somebody that'll post, his bail? And it's scary because when you're with his mindset, I would be afraid he would harm himself if he got out, or would he harm someone else?
I don't know that he would really harm. I mean, of course, I don't know, but I would assume if he is under house arrest, he's probably going to be under surveillance. But the thing.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details. With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
For me is that I'm not convinced at this point if somebody were to vouch for him or Lori and put a cash bail up of $1 million, they would swoop right in and probably go ahead and charge the both of them with double murder. They're not going to allow either one of these guys to go walk out of this courtroom.
Yeah. I thought it was crazy that the defense said he has no record of fleeing. And, you can look at, he fled when the cops showed up at Lori's to, try to do the welfare check. So, he lied to the cops there and fled, and the cops stopped him from leaving. And then he flees and goes to Hawaii. And, they avoid, trying to get, arrested there. And we never saw proof, but it was on the Dateline that they had booked a flight to Mexico. So there's another possibility of them flying, because I think when we were watching that, they said that's why they moved in quicker, because they had purchased, some tickets to go to Mexico. So we don't know if that's true or not, but that was what was on the Dateline that we watched. And
yeah,
they're
both flight risk.
Yeah, and then he flees when they're searching his home. So obviously he was there when they got there, and then he leaves.
Well, that was Mark Mead's argument when Lori was extradited back to Rexburg. He said she's not a flight risk, and I almost fell out of my chair because she's been in Kauai. She had a court order to produce her kids by a certain date. So in my mind, once that date passed, she was fleeing. She was not going back to court to face what a judge had said she had to do. So I just thought it was hilarious that Mark Means said, oh, she doesn't have a history of fleeing. Well, what do you consider fleeing, man?
Exactly. Obviously, yes, he does. And, in those areas, we've both been in Arizona and, in those areas like that. And you could easily hide somewhere with the terrain like it is. And
oh, yeah. And we don't know what associates of Chad may have isolated cabins in the middle of nowhere. It could have been, a situation where I honestly thought the bodies would maybe never be found. And goodness, here we are. They're in the backyard.
Yeah. It's crazy. And I got thinking about just other cases where that's been the case, that we've researched a little bit and know about, that, they bury them close so they can watch them. I just can't think, psychopath came to my mind this morning.
Yeah.
We've talked about sociopath. I don't know, in my mind, I think a psychopath's worse, but that's just my understanding and what I think. But how can you sit in your house? And I mean, obviously you have people over, you have grandkids. That's the thing that just, I don't understand. Yeah. How is it that Chad labeled all of Lori's family dark? And some of them light, but then his family, I mean,
they're all light.
They're all light and they're fine. They're alive. He's got grandkids. It just doesn't make any sense.
I think Chad wanted every reminder of her past life before she met him to be gone, and that unfortunately included the kids, because if you do the math, Charles Vallow was killed. You've got Tammy Daybell. That doesn't really relate to Lori, but the only person out there really that was close to Lori biologically would be Colby. And thank goodness Colby's a grown man and has a family of his own. He was far away from this madness. And Colby's going to have a lot to deal with, I think, emotionally. His mind's probably going to naturally go to, what did I not notice? I could have, if I talked to Tylee more, I feel so sorry for Colby, because he is going to undoubtedly go through his own self-guilt about these things. I don't think it was anything anybody could have predicted. If you look at the pictures when Colby got married, that kind of thing, they look very normal.
Yeah.
There was nothing there that would have shown me from the surface that she was crazy. Now, I think that he got married before Chad came in the picture, I believe. I'm not sure. They have a daughter who's maybe a year old, so I would assume he's been married a couple of years.
Well, I know his wedding, Charles was in the...
That's right, Charles, and it was at his house, wasn't it? It was in Charles's backyard, Charles and Lori's backyard.
Yeah.
So just a lot of stuff, but talking about having the bodies in the backyard, I'm looking at a picture right now on the True Crime Underground Lori Daybell Cult Mom page, which is a picture of Joseph Murray, which is Chad's daughter, Emma. It's her husband. He has also been very nasty vocally online to people that support the families. And from what I've read, Some of the kids, even after yesterday, are still screaming his innocence on social media. I can't confirm that. That was posted by somebody who knows the family. But apparently the kids are still saying that this is a misunderstanding. Whoops, don't know how the bodies got on our property, but daddy's good. He's innocent. That goes back to my theory that these kids were raised in this cult from the time they were probably, or not a cult, but his beliefs. I just wonder, were they raised to believe what he believed?
Yeah. And, Emma's husband or whatever, is he defending Chad because that's his wife's dad? And, we know, like, her, sticking her tongue out at the news reporter or whatever. We obviously know that they're immature. But it was cool that Nate gave him a shout out yesterday on that. I don't know if you guys saw it, but when they're doing the flyover, he had said some ugly stuff to Nate, and Nate commented and told him he'd be flying over in 5 minutes, and told Joseph hi.
That was the best shade I've ever seen thrown in my life. And he kind of smiled when he saw the comment.
Yeah.
It's like these guys are so convinced that Chad's innocent. This is all a misunderstanding. We will make a statement when speculation dies down, I think was what Mark Mean said. Well, okay, where's your statement, buddy? Because we have bodies now, and what are we still speculating on? Seems pretty cut and dry to me what happened.
Exactly.
I think, so they took the bodies, we were talking about this earlier, the remains were taken about 4.5 hours away for autopsy. I would say probably that autopsy started as soon as the remains got there. I feel like maybe in the next couple of days we'll hear an exact cause of death. They have to notify the families first. They have to draw up legal papers. They're going to be working on official charges. I'm curious to see the cause of death. I hope however it was, the kids didn't suffer. But good grief. It's, do you feel like maybe the kid's death is a direct result of maybe what Tylee knew about Charles's shooting?
I mean, it's a possibility. We've seen that feed, the body cam from the cops over and over again. And we don't know. I mean, we really don't know what Lori put in her head, and what was said. We just don't know. And unfortunately, 3 out of the 4 people that know what happened, well, I would say 4 out of, well, if you count JJ, 4 out of the 5, are deceased.
Right.
So Lori's the only one that knows, truly what happened. And I don't know. I mean, you're a 16, 17-year-old kid, and your mom, who's raised you, for your whole life.
Right.
Starts going down this path.
And do you remember when Annie came to visit Tylee? Was it after Charles's death?
I want to say it was 2018, but I'm not. I'll have to go.
Yeah. So the one thing that Annie Cushing, who is Tylee Ryan's aunt and Joseph Ryan's sister, that was Lori's third husband who died of a heart attack in 2018.
Yes.
Which I have a lot of questions about that. Just going to put it out there. He was cremated, so there's probably not a whole lot they could do to prove otherwise unless they had digital evidence. I'm not convinced Alex's death was an accident or natural. But let me see. I'm trying to look here at something real quick. Sorry, guys. I thought we had a little bit of news, but it was just an old piece. I said, why am I losing my train of thought today?
You didn't have your coffee.
I know. Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I've only had 1 cup of coffee today. That's a sin in my world. But, Annie had said that Tylee, the last time she saw her, Tylee was kind of full of teenage angst, which is kind of normal, I guess, if you have teenagers. She slept a lot, and she noticed a lot of tension between Lori and Tylee. She also said that Tylee had a very strong sense of right and wrong. So one of my theories is that maybe because Tylee was there, obviously, when Charles was shot, and told police that she came out with the bat. It seemed really coaxed to me. I don't know that, I totally believe that they put on her shoulders, hey, if you don't lie for us, we're all going to go to prison. You're going to go in foster care, however they might have scared her. And unfortunately, we will never know because Tylee is apparently, from what we can tell, no longer with us. But so is it a situation where with Tylee that she just knew too much and maybe her sense of right and wrong kicked in? Is it a situation where she was not a fan of Chad's? She was not a fan of this new belief system her mom had? There's so many different options as to how it became convenient for Tylee to not be here anymore. And I think that, unfortunately, the day that Charles died was the day that JJ definitely was in danger.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Charles, making his comment to the police, he just didn't fight for JJ. He wanted to see Tylee too. Yeah. And he called her, my daughter and my son.
Mm-hmm. That spoke volumes to me.
Yeah. Because we know.
Right. Because it's not a secret, maybe, that Charles and Tylee butted heads, especially about JJ. I think Tylee definitely took on that mom role. And I think sometimes Charles didn't like it. And that's understandable if you have a teenager raising a younger sibling who they want to overrule you on, how it's going to go, rules, boundaries, or whatever. But at the end of the day, he still called Tylee his daughter.
Exactly.
So that showed you how he felt about her. He could have said my wife's daughter, but he made it sound like Tylee was his, and I thought that was just, really a sweet thing.
In briefly talking about that whole body cam footage when he was speaking to that officer, and we've talked about this, he comes back, she canceled his flight.
Right.
She, took his truck. He couldn't get in the house, like all these things. I don't know about you, but I would be highly angry. And in that interview, I hear, concern, he wasn't irate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was upset, but again, he's still just trying to find his kids, and get in his house and all that kind of stuff. And it was hard. It's hard to listen to him, pleading and trying to do what he needed to do.
Right.
To, one, get her help. After she did all that to him, he still loved her.
Right.
And trying to get her help.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he could have very easily, hopefully found JJ, took JJ and left and just let her be who she wanted to be. But he, was trying to get her help. And he said on that, we've been married, we'll be married 13 years. I love her, something's just, something's wrong.
Yeah. It's just so sad because I firmly believe that if law enforcement had taken Charles more seriously, maybe he could have gotten temporary custody of JJ before the divorce happened. And we might have a different outcome. We might not even know about these people today if it weren't for the missing kids. And, we said this yesterday, had Kay not did the welfare check, it's likely that Charles's death and Tammy's death would have just been swept under the rug. So, things happen for a reason. At least, hopefully, we'll see some justice. So, where do we go from here? Chad?
I wanted to jump real quick real quick. And we were talking about, how did they find out where everything was? We don't know. They could have had wiretaps on all those phones. We know that they were listening to Chad and Lori's conversation because that's allowed. The only one they can't listen to is attorney-client. But so is that how, did they slip up somewhere there and make a comment or something and that tipped,
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. However, I don't think that Lori and Chad would be stupid enough to be talking about exact locations on what they know to be recorded police or jailhouse conversations because they went right to that spot. I don't think Lori said, hey, remember when you buried the kids, 20 feet west of the fire pit? I still think somebody talked.
Yeah.
I just, at the end of the day, it was so specific. It sounds like somebody broke.
Yeah.
Who could that be? I don't think it was Melanie Gibb. I don't think it was Julie Rowe. I'm still sort of back and forth with the Lori thing. We heard yesterday that when she was told that they had executed a search warrant on his property and that Chad had been taken into custody, It was posted in one of the groups that somebody who knows somebody in Rexburg, and I don't really like relaying this kind of stuff because it could be totally false, but we'll put it out there and just say that we don't take any responsibility for the post itself. We're just speculating and letting you guys know the different theories that are out there, the different statements. But according to an administrator of a group that we follow, and who I think, has most of the time been very honest in her post and tried to make sure they were factually correct, said that when Lori was told this, she went berserk. That she started cursing, she flipped out, might have thrown things around in her cell. We don't know if that's the case. If that is the case, I would say it definitely wasn't Lori that led police. Dad with a phone yesterday, who I don't follow him at all. I do know during the Suzanne case a few weeks ago when they were digging up property, he had made some statements that turned out to be completely false. I've read groups that love the guy to death, and I've read groups that feel like he's not believable. So it's hard for me to say, well, this is really what happened. We're just passing on what was said in a group about potentially Lori's reaction to all this. So what they agreed on today as far as the next step in the courtroom, as we said, the judge sets it at $1 million. Chad would have to stay within 4 different counties. I think one is the county he lives. The other is probably the county where his attorney has an office. He would have to wear an ankle monitor. He would have to check in once a week with a pretrial, I guess like a probation, not a probation, but like a pretrial, somebody who's like a probation officer for somebody who hasn't been convicted. And as of right now, the preliminary hearing is set for July 1st, and they have reserved July 2nd, rolling over should it go past that point. Prosecutor made very clear they're ready to go. They need one day to prepare for a preliminary hearing that could last 2. That tells me they've already got this case sealed up enough to where they feel confident they can get that judge to agree that a big trial, regular trial is needed. And that's what the preliminary hearing does. You go in and present enough evidence. You don't show all your cards, but you present enough evidence to that judge. You might bring in a couple of witnesses to convince that judge that, yes, there is enough probable cause to go ahead and set a trial date. Now, from there, what do you think, Fruit Loop? Do we go to trial, or do you think that eventually Chad and Lori just plead guilty and they'll never get out of prison? But do they take a lesser sentence? The question is, do they do death penalty? They go after death penalty. They might for Chad. Don't know about Lori. It's harder to convict a woman with the death penalty. We saw it in Jodi Arias. As brutal as that crime was, there was one juror that held out. I was in the courtroom when that came down. It was very emotional for the family. But one juror felt that in their mind, she had been taken advantage of by Travis and did not deserve death. So do Chad and Lori take that chance where they go before a jury, or do they plead?
In their mindset, I don't think they plead.
I agree.
Yeah. They're just too, high and mighty on themselves.
And also, they probably just assume the world's ending on July 22nd, so you're never going to go to trial. I'd be curious to know, if I could open a door and climb in their brain, do they really believe this now? Has Lori been away from Chad long enough to sort of get her normal way of thinking, however that may be, back?
She's been talking to him. I mean, Nate posted they spend 2 hours or something on the phone each day. So up until yesterday, they were still communicating. So I'm going to say he's still been, saying whatever.
I'm going to try to find a little tiny video clip that was filmed the first time that when Lori was in Rexburg. Chad is sitting a few rows behind where she is. And when she walks in, she kind of walks in with that little strut, and she is kind of grinning. And then she turns around once she's situated and looks at Chad. And he gives her a look that really was chilling to me. Mm-hmm. It was a look that, I guess if I could put words to it, it would be like, you stay the course. It was almost a warning look. I don't know. I think Chad's going to be the puppet master. Lori's not innocent, but Lori didn't do any of this stuff before she met Chad.
Yeah.
There are people that want to blame her solely, but no, I think if you look at her history, definitely not perfect. Probably some mental illness there, but she wasn't killing her kids.
Yeah. I think she had issues, with...
But her childhood and her parents, by what we know, doesn't seem like she had any kind of a normal upbringing, and her parents seem to have played the victim with the feds about their taxes.
Yeah, they didn't. I read through that. They didn't think that they had to pay taxes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad you're exempt from paying taxes, unlike the rest of us.
So Post Register just put a post out, it's postregister.com, that the 2 sets of human remains found on Chad Daybell's property were 8-year-old J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, according to Larry Woodcock, who we know is J.J. Vallow's grandfather. He made the comment that both children are no longer with us.
Yeah, and it's really weird for me because as much as I flip-flopped between are they alive or dead, the police video, the body cam footage of them in Gilbert when Charles took her purse, the way they were so fluid together, I really thought that maybe there was a chance Tylee was alive. But, as many times as I see the family confirm something, it just makes my heart sink.
Yeah, and Kay and Larry both, to me, are, like typical grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
They've got other grandkids, and they're just lovable.
Right, they are.
And the last few interviews with him, he was, you could just hear it in his voice. He was emotional.
Oh, yeah.
So my heart breaks for them, and they've said stuff about Kay, I'm not an emotional person. And when you're put in front of a camera like that, you're going to get scrutinized any way you turn.
Right. If she would have tried to, if she would have cried because she felt like, not in a mean, like to deceive anybody, but if she would have tried to get emotional, people would have called it fake. If she doesn't get emotional, people say she don't care, she's in it for the money. At the end of the day, those of you that don't know the situation, it can be a little confusing. This whole case can be a lot confusing. But Kay and Larry are the biological grandparents of JJ. They have a son, and JJ is the product of their son. And they apparently had some addiction issues and were unable to properly care for JJ. So initially, right out of the hospital, I believe JJ went home with Kay and Larry.
Yeah.
And over time, it became apparent that JJ was autistic and had a lot of needs that Kay and Larry, at their age, as well as being full-time business owners, as they put it, was a 24/7 business where they apparently were on call. They decided it would not be fair to JJ to keep him because they could not provide the level of care he would need to thrive and to grow. So Kay's brother is Charles. So that would make Charles technically the uncle, great uncle of JJ, who's married to Lori. They decided to adopt JJ, and Kay and Larry thought it was a perfect match because, as she said, Lori was Mom of the Year. And she said they were always busy. And so that's how that ties in. So Kay's son is the biological father of JJ. Kay's brother is Charles, who adopted JJ with Lori. So JJ stayed in the family, which I'm sure was a big comfort to Kay. But that's the dynamics that I had somebody ask earlier how that worked out. But yeah, so that's kind of pretty much all for today. If there's anything major, we'll let you know. But as we see now, the news stories are starting. We're trolling social media right now and major news sites. It's out there that it's both the children, unfortunately, that were found. We'll see if they find anything else on the property. I'm very curious. Once these autopsies are performed, I feel certain the DNA has been performed. Idaho does have the rapid DNA, which can take, I believe, 4 to 5 hours to get a positive back. We know the families have already submitted DNA before the remains were found, just in case. So I'm sure they have the positive, and now the next would be the manner of death, and then look for formal charges on the actual deaths of the kids and not just disposing and destroying remains. So we'll keep you guys updated. We have we are going to work on a Facebook page. This is very quickly thrown together yesterday with the news. Our Twitter handle is at Pretty Lies Alibi. Couldn't get the whole thing in there, so it's PrettyLiesAlibi. And you can follow us over there, where I will be tweeting out a lot of news stories, things that we find online. We kind of just make that a place where we sift through all the stories and give you the best ones. And we'll be working on a Facebook page later on. And eventually we will cover other cases here. But for right now, we've been very invested in this case since it broke in the media. And so we feel, the George Floyd hearing has completed, and the Aubrey case in Georgia right now, we'll bring you any developments on those. But for right now, there's no immediate court dates on the horizon. So for right now, we're going to kind of focus on this case because the information is coming out so quickly. There's a new development, it seems, every hour right now. So just stick with us, and we will post when we go live here. I think that you can choose to follow us, and it will alert you when we go live. We have submitted to have this podcast put on the iOS and the Android, their respective podcast stores. We are on Spotify now, and we are working on iHeartRadio. So we're just working really quickly to get this thing out there. We're going to be here with you till this case wraps up and beyond. So hope you guys have a good day, and Fruit Loop.
Yeah, thank y'all for listening.
Yeah, and we'll be in touch. If anything big happens, we'll hop right back on here. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mikhail, for being here from the beginning. We appreciate it.